Hi, this is John Harcher, and welcome to episode 28 of Left Turn at Albuquerque, and on to Golden Collection Volume 2, which has a lot of things that most of us probably thought would be on Volume 1, plus 4. Again.
I knew I should have made a left turn at Albuquerque. I knew I should have taken that left turn at Albuquerque. I knew I should have taken that left turn at Albuquerque. I should have turned left at Albuquerque.
Looney Tunes Golden Collection Volume 2 came out almost exactly 1 year after Volume 1, November 2nd, 2004, and this time they did include 60 cartoons. Disc 1 started off as the last one did, with a disc of Bugs Bunny cartoons. The big snooze we did back in episode 8 with its appearance on Platinum Collection Volume 3. Later, Peanuts director Bill Melendez does the commentary here as he worked on the cartoon, credited as J.C. Melendez. And notice, no director credited. Broomstick Bunny was on Platinum Collection Volume 1, and we did it in Episode 3. This has the June Foray commentary track, as well as a music and effects track. Bugs Bunny Rides Again we did in Episode 10.2 with its blue debut on the Bugs Bunny 80th Anniversary set. Greg Ford does the commentary on this one. Bunny Hugged was on Platinum Collection Volume 3 on the Bug-centric Disc 1, as well as the Big Snooze, which means we did it in Episode 8. This one also has a music and effects track. French Rarebit was released on July 10, 1951, directed by Robert McKimson and written by Ted Pierce. Bugs ends up in Paris playing Yojimbo to two warring chefs, one of whom is voiced by the writer.
Your rabbit? No, Monsieur Francois. The rabbit, she is mine.
The gang has fun coming up with the ingredients and directions for the rabbit recipe, then putting them on display. This was in syndication since I was small. Gorilla My Dreams was another from Disc 1 on Platinum Collection Volume 3 and done in Episode 8. Jerry Beck does a commentary track. The Harebrained Hypnotist came out on Halloween, October 31st, 1942, directed by Fritz Freleng and written by Michael Maltese. Elmer learns hypnotism, but it gets turned back against him by Bugs' innovations, and ends up getting hypnotized himself, which Bugs ends up regretting. Freleng tried to make Elmer a tougher character, even turning him into Bugs in this one, but when he just couldn't, he came up with Yosemite Sam. Now this one does have some precursors to the later Hairbrush, which literally turns Elmer into a rabbit. This one was part of the AAP package. In fact, it's in the Boomerang rotation, complete with the AAP intro still attached. Hair Condition we just did in episode 26 with its appearance on Collector's Vault Volume 1 Disc 2. Since I didn't do it there, here's a little of Dave Barry's manager, who sounds just like the great Gildersleeves.
Kind of outsmarted you, little chum?
The next one we did as an extra plus 4 to the Bugs Bunny 80th Anniversary set, so here it is again. The Heckling Hare was released on July 5th, 1941, directed by Tex Avery and written by Michael Maltese. This is best known for being the cartoon that got Tex Avery fired. But what exactly was he fired for? The story for years went that after Bugs and Willoughby the dog stopped falling, they turned and fell off another cliff. But before they went over, Bugs said, "Hold on to your hats, here we go again!" Then it happened again before the cartoon ends. Now, I'd heard this saying before and never knew it was a punchline to a dirty joke. Looking up on the internet, I'm not going to get flagged for this. When Leon Schlesinger said that whole bit needed to be taken out, Fred wouldn't do it and got fired, and we got the ending we have. But is that what actually happened? Now, I referenced this story when we did Falling Hare, since the gag with the plane is basically the same thing, and it didn't get Bob fired. Yet. Then, interestingly enough, soon after that episode came out, Comic Book Resources, CBR, ran a story about this very issue. Thanks to the diligent work of Michael Barrier and Thad Kay, a.k.a. Komorowski, they uncovered the actual script for the Heckling Hare. And guess what line was not in there? The line is written was simply, "Well, here we go again," which had been in several cartoons before and since. It's possible Mel ad-libbed the first part, but there's no evidence of it. So as it is, Leon just thought the second and third fall wasn't funny and maybe a bit morbid. Not sure if it was worth firing Avery over it, but sometimes that's what happens. Probably the last straw of something. Greg Ford does a commentary. Little Red Riding Rabbit is yet another from Platinum Collection Volume 3, Disc 1 and Episode 8. I'm surprised it took that long to get on Blu-ray. Tortoise Beats Hare and Rabbit Transit were both done on Platinum Collection Volume 2, Disc 2, and we did it in Episode 6. Now, I saw the Part 2 of the trio was on Volume 1. Now, Tortoise Beats Hare does have a commentary with Michael Barrier and Chuck Jones. Next is Slick Hare. Yes, Platinum Collection Volume 3 and Episode 8. Michael Barrier's commentary was the one that pointed out the paw prints on the wall. Baby Buggy Bunny was on the Bugs Bunny 80th Anniversary set, and we did it in Episode 10.3. This one has a music and effects track. Finally, Hyde and Hare was released on August 27, 1955, directed by Friz Freleng and written by Warren Foster. Bugs meets Dr. Jekyll, and when you meet him, you know who's not far behind. Now, originally I thought this was a McKimson, but it's clearly a Freleng. I should have realized it with Bugs playing the
Minute Waltz by Chopin.
There's some pretty frightening sequences in this one for a Bugs Bunny cartoon. Now, this turns out to be the second of Friz's Jekyll and Hyde cartoons. This one has a music-only track. Bonuses include Part 1 of the Looney Tunes 50th Anniversary Special we did with the Bugs 80th set, it's one with all the celebrities, a Behind the Tunes featurette on Tex Avery, and more framing sequences and audio sessions from the 60s Bugs Bunny show. Disc 2 starts out as a Roadrunner and Coyote disc, but then meanders off into other characters, all by Chuck Jones and Michael Maltese. Well, almost all. Now, I thought of something we can add since this disc contains the 2nd through 12th Roadrunner cartoons. We'll add in the Latin names they came up for the duo. So, for example, back in Fast and Furious, they were Accelerate Incredibilis and Carnivorous Vulgaris. These were actually the same for the next 2 tunes, which we've already done, so we'll save a bit of time there. Now, don't worry, we'll go back and handle all the rest of them by the time we get to Volume 6. I'm also going to do the same thing here I did with the Ralph and Sam one on last volume. I'll just describe in kind of loose terms the Roadrunner shorts, and then when we get the Blu-ray versions, we'll go through them plot by plot and how the coyote fails every time. Beep Beep was on Platinum Collection Volume 1 and was done back in Episode 2. Michael Barrier does a commentary here. Going, Going, Gosh, and Zipping Along we did in Episode 5 since they were on Platinum Collection Volume 2. Zipping Along begins the new Latin names, Velocitus Tremendius and Roadrunnerus Digestus. Stop, Look, and Hasten came out on August 14, 1954. Hot Rodicus Supersonicus and Oedipus Anythingus. Highlights of this one include the Burmese Tiger Trap, complete with actual Burmese tiger, the Saw and Falling Bridge routine, and an excellent example of the Chekhov's gun principle. Greg Ford contributes a commentary track. Ready, Set, Zoom was released on April 30th, 1955. Speedopus Rex and Famicius. Notable attempts here include the Glue in the Road and with Dynamite, the Lasso of TNT, the Motor and Roller Skates, and the Dangers of the Female Roadrunner costume. Guided Muscle was on Disc 2 of Platinum Collection Volume 3, and we talked about it in Episode 9. It has a music-only track as well, along with the next 4 cartoons. The names here, Velocitus Delectabilis and Oedipus Almost Anythingus. Gee Whiz we just did in Episode 27 since it was on Disc 2 of Collector's Vault Volume 1. Delicious and Edius Birdius. There They Go 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 came out on November 10, 1956. Digotius Tidbidius and Famicius Fantiscus. This one has the rope and the spear, the tree catapult, spinning maces, the falling ladders, and rocks that won't come down without some help. Scrambled Aches was released on January 26, 1957. Tastius Supersonicus and Eternally Famicius. This has the fan, sail, and roller skates get up, the anvil and the balloon, and the high tension wires, dehydrated boulders, and another Chekhov's gun example. Remember to use these in class, students. Zoom and Board was also on Collector's Vault Volume 1 Disc 2, and we talked about in Episode 27. We have Birdibus Zippibus and Famicius Vulgaris. Woe Begone came out on April 12, 1958, Bertius Hyballius, and Famicius Vulgaris Ingeniosity. Probably the most memorable incident in here is the barrel and dynamite situation where the coyote tries desperately to get out, and does, only to find out he still has it on his head. The tightrope and wheel helmet is another good one, and the tornado seed finale is another highlight. This one has a Greg Ford commentary track as well. Like I said, we'll recap the rest of the Latin names as we go along. They are only in the Chuck Jones ones. None of them are in the Larivas, McKimsons, or the one by Friz Freleng. The rest of the cartoons on the disc are all on Blu-ray. Cheese Chasers with Hubie and Bert was on the Mouse Chronicles, and we talked about in episode 15. Dover Boys was on Platinum Collection Volume 1. We talked about in episode 3. This one also has a commentary track by Michael Barrier. Mouse Records is another Hubie and Bert, so Mouse Chronicles in episode 15. It also has a Greg Ford commentary track. And finally, Bear for Punishment was on Platinum Collection Volume 3, Disc 1, and we talked about in episode 8. Michael Barrier does a commentary and has a music and effects track. Now, the Three Bears cartoons are all on Blu-ray except for one. It is on DVD on a later collection. Maybe it'll be taken care of by the time we get to it. Bonuses for this disc include a Behind the Tunes featurette on Soundmaster Trey Brown, and a bit of nostalgia for those of us who grew up in the 70s, the opening to CBS's Bugs Bunny Roadrunner show. But the big one is the full 26-minute Adventures of Roadrunner short. We'll save the discussion of this until the end. There's lots to go over. Now, disc 3 kind of does the same for Tweety and Sylvester. It's their disc until it morphs into a Porky and Daffy disc. It has the 3rd through 14th Tweety and Sylvesters, except where it doesn't. Bad Ol Putty Tat was released on July 23rd, 1949, directed by Friz Freleng, as all the Tweetys and Sylvesters were, and written by Ted Pierce. We get right to an opening gag of Tweety's birdhouse surrounded by barbed wire and Sylvester all cut up. He then tries a trampoline and a saw. Tweety gets away on a clothespin, and Sylvester gets his tooth tied to a rocket. He tries the old girl bird in the nest by painting his finger, which means Tweety is a boy, believe it or not. The little bird then becomes an actual badminton birdie. Sylvester's last resort, become a birdhouse. Friz and the gang started to stretch out in this short. This may have been a syndicated one, but I seem to more remember it from the networks. It would have been like one of the earliest that they had. All Abir-r-r-d came out on June 24th, 1950, also by Freleng and Pierce. Friz channels Hitchcock by sending Tweety onto a train next to Sylvester in the baggage compartment that also has a bulldog as a passenger. So once again, it's Sylvester trying to get Tweety up high, this time all types of train gags like pulling the emergency cord, you know the type. This was definitely a network one. Room and Bird was released on June 2nd, 1951, this time writing by the duo of Pierce and Warren Foster. Granny tries to sneak Tweety into her apartment where pets are banned, the same time as Sylvester's owner tries to sneak him in. So the whole time Sylvester's trying to get Tweety, they're both trying to hide from the house detective. You gotta come up with a gimmick to keep these interesting. Again, this is one from the networks. Tweet Tweet Tweety came out December 15th, 1951 by the Freleng and Foster duo. Tweety's a resident of a national park where there's no hunting allowed, but that's not going to stop Sylvester so easily. Being outside gave Fritz and the gang access to a whole different set of gags. And this is another network one. It also has a music and effects track. Gift Wrap we did back in episode 5 due to its appearance on the first disc of Platinum Collection Volume 2. Ain't She Tweet was the first short on disc 2 of Collector's Vault Volume 1, and we discussed it in episode 26. Now, Greg Ford points out in his commentary track that Friz used a lot of implication in his shorts. We don't see what happens with Sylvester and the Bulldogs, but we still have a pretty good idea of the outcome. Bird in a Guilty Cage was released on August 30th, 1952. You know who directing and writing. Tweety's in a store display window, so Sylvester tries to get in after hours, and once he does, the fun begins. All the department store gags are available, and Friz uses as many as possible. This one also has a music and effects track. Again, these last three I pretty much remember from the network. Speaking of network, Snow Business was also on Collected Vault Volume 1, and we talked about in episode 26. Now, Tweety Pie we talked about a number of times, first in episode 2, then talking about the missing introduction in episode 23 with the Sylvester Superstars disc. I'm still stunned how producer Ed Seltzer almost lost his feeling over originally not letting him use Tweety. I think Greg Ford recaps the story in his commentary track. Now, why wasn't this first on the disc? And when are we getting the second one? Ol Putty Tat. Now, we'll talk about that on a later collection. So, in the run from Tweety Pie through Snow Business, Putty Tat Trouble and Tweety's SOS were on Volume 1. Home Tweet Home would finally come out of Platinum Collection Volume 2. And we're still waiting for Ol Putty Tat. Though, like I said, we'll get to it in a couple of volumes. Just odd the way this was done. The disc now switches over to Porky Pig and Daffy Duck shorts, mostly by Bob Clampett, but Frizz and Chuck get one each. All but one ended up on Blu-ray, and we've talked about them all. Kitty Cornered, Baby Bottleneck, Old Glory, and The Great Piggy Bank Robbery were all on Platinum Collection Volume 1 and talked about in Episode 2. Porky and Wacky Land appeared on Platinum Collection Volume 2 and was discussed in Episode 5, as well as getting touched on again last time out thanks to the remake. Michael Barry does commentaries for Kitty Cornered and Baby Bottleneck. Jerry Beck does Old Glory. Ron Crick-Fazuli takes the honors for The Great Piggy Bank Robbery. The only one of this batch that hasn't gotten a blue upgrade yet is Duck Soup to Nuts, which came out on May 27, 1944, directed by Friz Freleng and written by Ted Pierce. Daffy tries to convince Hunter Porky not to shoot him. That's pretty much the whole cartoon. This is one of those cartoons where I didn't remember certain parts of it, but other sections like the Pig-Eagle interchange.
I'm not a pig. You're illegal. Pig, eagle, pig, eagle, pig, eagle, pig, eagle, pig, pig, eagle, pig, eagle, pig, eagle, pig, eagle, pig.
And the family visit before his execution, where a certain name pops up again.
So long, Sylvester.
Are clear as a bell as a TBS staple. Bonuses include Part 2 of the Looney Tunes 50th Anniversary Special, a new short, Daffy Duck for President, with a story by Chuck Jones that plays off his classic trilogy. We briefly talked about this on the Daffy Essentials. A behind-the-tunes short on Bob Clampett. And 2 versions of the intros to ABC's Bugs and Tweety show from the late 80s and early 90s. Disc 4 follows a theme. All the tunes have to do with show business in some way, shape, or form. We've done all but 2 of these. Back Alley Uproar and Book Review were on Platinum Collection Volume 2, Disc 1, and talked about in Episode 5. Greg Ford does the Back Alley commentary, while Michael Barrier takes on Book Review. A Corny Concerto was on Platinum Collection Volume 3, Disc 2, and discussed in Episode 9. Another mention in Episode 21. Barrier does a commentary here. Have You Got Any Castles was released on June 25th, 1938. This is one of those Warner's Books Comes to Life cartoons like Book Review, this time out directed by Frank Tashlin and written by Jack Miller. Depictions of Bill Bojangles Robinson, the Old Spiritual Green Pastures, and Cab Calloway and his dancers means one thing. This was never shown on TV. It was actually newly restored for this particular release. Hollywood Steps Out was on Platinum Collection Volume 3, Disc 2, and talked about in Episode 9. Greg Ford does the commentary. And this gives me a chance to fix an error from back in that episode. I had said that Dave Barry did most of the male voices. Loyal viewer Brian LT pointed out that it was actually Ken Rogers. Yes, an 18-year-old was doing all those voices. Such a shame we lost him at such a young age. It also turns out there were additional segments with Gary Cooper and Edna Mae Oliver, among others, that got cut. There was a copy of it in the 80s, but it got stolen and no one's seen it since. I Love to Sing a Catnip College, 3 Little Bops, and 1 Froggy Evening were all on Platinum Collection Volume 1, Disc 2, and talked about in Episode 3. The one in between Catnip and Bops, the Hep Cat, was on Platinum Collection Volume 3 and gone over in Episode 8. Bops and Froggy have music-only tracks. The 3 Little Bops also has Stan Freeberg's isolated vocals as well as commentary from him and Jerry Beck, while 1 Froggy Evening has commentary from Michael Barrier. Rhapsody Rabbit we just did in episode 26, as it was on Collected Vault Volume 1. Daniel Goldmark does the commentary track. As for the other places the music was used, we'll do the full list when we do Cat Concerto. Disney did it once, Warner's used it at least 2 other times, and even Walter Lantz got into the act. Which reminds me, happy 85th birthday to Woody Woodpecker as well. Come on, Universal, you gotta get on the ball with these shorts. Showbiz Bugs was on Platinum Collection Volume 2, Disc 1, and reviewed in Episode 5. Greg Ford does the commentary here. Stage Door Cartoon came out on December 30th, 1944, directed by Fritz Freeling and written by Ted Pierce and Michael Maltese. Elmer, at first with a fishing pole, chases Bugs into a theater where all sorts of mayhem ensues, including a high diving act and Romeo and Juliet, complete with making faces at the audience. It was cartoons like this that had Elmer taking such a beating at Bugs' hands that led to the creation of Yosemite Sam by Frizz just to make it fair. He even started with this character here.
You're under arrest for indecent southern exposure.
This was part of the AAP package, so I've seen it since I was small. And it may very well be the first appearance of this music. What's Opera Doc? We went over in episode 2. As mentioned there, it's such an important cartoon. It has 2 commentary tracks, one by Daniel Goldmark and the other by Chuck Jones, an archived tape from Michael Maltese and Maurice Noble, a music-only track, and isolated vocals from Mel Blanc and Arthur Q. Bryan. And this isn't even the last cartoon on the disc. They saved that for You Ought to Be in Pictures, which was on Platinum Collection Volume 2, Disc 1, like Showbiz Bugs, and was in Episode 5 as well. Jerry Beck does the commentary. The Behind the Tunes featurettes are about how the Looney Tunes handled Hollywood and the making of One Froggy Evening and What's Opera Doc. These both should have been on Volume 1. Plus 2 bonus cartoons that were extras on the additional disc to Platinum Collection Volume 1. So Much for So Little about healthcare that won the Oscar for Best Documentary, and Orange Blossom for Violet by Chuck Jones and Fritz Freeling, which really isn't a cartoon but has a bunch of animals in dress-up. Okay, now for a broader discussion of the adventures of Roadrunner pilot/short. It was released to theaters on June 2nd, 1962 with the film version of Lad a Dog. Now, it was not planned as a theatrical release. It was supposed to be the pilot for a TV show. But it wasn't picked up, so Warner salvaged it by releasing it as a short. It combined new footage with material from previous shorts, including From A to Z, since Ralph Phillips makes an appearance here. So now, here's a recap of the entire short. To the tune of Out on the Desert,
Out on the desert, early in the morning.
The Roadrunner and Coyote continue their chase. The Roadrunner goes so fast he collapses a bridge and jumbles up a speed limit sign. We see some familiar attempts by the Coyote, like the bow and the rock and lever and the plane and the grenade. Coyote uses a rope to catch the Roadrunner, but he ends up falling off of a cliff. The rope catches on a rock, but he hits the ground before it goes taut. He gets up and the rock falls on him. Now back in his cave, super genius Wile E. Coyote goes over exactly what went wrong with his latest endeavor. He tries it again, but a truck runs over the rope. We then switch to Ralph Phillips and his friend in a cowboy hat watching the Roadrunner Coyote on TV, including a commercial for a familiar-looking Batman outfit. Ralph says he likes to daydream about being a Roadrunner, and we get some flashbacks to From A to Z in the form of a psychiatric exam. You know, I think we actually get the whole cartoon here. Once Ralph is cured, or not, they go back to watching TV. Ralph wonders why the Coyote wants a Roadrunner anyway. Wile E. Coyote stops and breaks the fourth wall to explain the large amount of flavors one Roadrunner has. After looking through a cookbook, he gets surprised by a meep meep. And we go back to the plots as he tries a wrecking ball, tries to use a spring, but the rock goes backwards and they bounce all over the desert. So Wile E decides to resort to a good old-fashioned catapult, but he can never seem to get it to work correctly. The reason is it was made by the Roadrunner Blueprint Company. You can see how this was kind of an evolution of the Bugs Bunny show idea, expanding it into a lot of newer segments wrapped around some of the older cartoons. It has 3 basic segments: the coyote dissecting his failed attempt with the rope, Ralph and his friend watching TV, and the catapult. In this case, only the original Ralph Phillips cartoon is shown in full. The other cartoons they took from, like Gee Whiz and Zip and Snort, just bits and pieces. Now, I'm not sure if the audience would have been ready for this much of a change compared to the old format. You can understand why ABC decided to pass. Now, the other interesting part is Wile E. Coyote finally merged his Roadrunner persona with his super genius Bugs Bunny battling identity. Had to finally happen somewhere. Now, it turns out a second episode was not only planned, but was in production when the news came it would be going forward. This material was repackaged and used to make up Hairbreadth Hurry, with Bugs filling in for the Roadrunner. Now, I have to wonder if War and Pieces may have also been made up from this material. There's nothing I know suggesting that. I just wonder because To Beep or Not to Beep came out before it. More on that in a minute. Now, as we mentioned in the Roadrunner Superstars episode, there were 3 shorter cartoons created out of the 26-minute episode. First is the aforementioned To Beep or Not to Beep. Now, for you Star Trek fans, think of the Adventures of Roadrunner as the cage and To Beep or Not to Beep as the menagerie, just shorter. This will actually show up on Volume 3, but let's go ahead and do it now with the rundown still fresh in our minds. It was released on December 28th, 1963. The original short had Maurice Noble and Tom Ray listed as co-directors, and John Dunn and Michael Maltese joining Jones on the story. But here, it's only Noble and Dunn that receive additional credit. The cartoon combines the opening section where the coyote uses a variety of methods to catch the Roadrunner, and the closing catapult section of the short, and removes all the parts where Wile addresses the audience. This one also has a new score by Bill Lava. When we get the blue upgrade for this, we'll do a shot-by-shot telling of what sections of the Adventures of Roadrunner were re-edited to make up this cartoon. Then in 1965, DePatie Freleng created 2 more cartoons out of the pilot. This time there was very little effort put into it. They just cut them together differently and released them. Only not to theaters. It looks like these went right to TV. Zip Zip Hooray was released on January 1st, 1965. Convenient. It mainly concentrates on the Ralph Phillips and his friend part of the short, excluding the From A to Z portion. The other one, Roadrunner A Go-Go, which officially, quote-unquote, came out on February 1st, 1965, edits together the opening news portion and closing catapult section and brings it in around 6 minutes. But unlike To Beep or Not to Beep, it leaves in Wile talking to the audience. Both of these also leave Milt Franklin's original score for the scenes in place. For the ones on each disc, I'd like to see a blue upgrade sooner than later. Disc 1, Hyde and Hare. Disc 2, The Next Roadrunner, Stop Look and Hasten. Disc 3, Bad Ol Putty Tat. And Disc 4, Stage Door Cartoon. And our extra, let's go with the Heckling Hare. Now, to plug in the holes from the 3, we moved over to Volume 1. For Tweety Pie, it should have been Foul Weather because that's the next in the series, but that's still not out on video yet. So instead, we'll plug in Birds Anonymous, the Oscar winner. The other 2 are a little tougher because they came from the disc focusing on Stage 3 and the song. We can move up Whittier Wabbit from Volume 3 and Hollywood Daffy from Volume 5. And you know what? For the heck of it, we're going to slide Tortoise Wins by a Hair over to here and move Little Red Riding Rabbit over to Volume 1. Here's the oddest thing about Golden Collection Volume 2. You take it out of its case. Oh, okay. You open it up. It's got all that stuff in there. So now here's your binder. Now, if you put it in this way, so if it's facing like this, look at what it looks like on front. I mean, they did it backwards. So Warner's quality control problems began a long time ago. Now, in case you're wondering, as you can see, we're doing things quickly for tunes that we've already talked about that have appeared on Blu-ray. Now that we're going over a lot of these on DVD, what's going to happen when these show up on Blu-ray on Collector's Vault or somewhere else? Well, it'll depend. If I can come up with a new approach like what we did with Little Boy Boo or Baton Bunny, we'll do a whole new segment. Some of these we've gone over a couple times, like Water Water Every Hare and Yankee Doodle Daffy. These will probably just get a title card or what episode we did it in and notes on the Blue Restoration and Upgrade. It'll definitely be a case-by-case basis. Now, a quick note, Anthony over on the Animation Talk channel let us know that his daughter had a little health issue recently, but looks like she's recovering okay, so our thoughts go out to them. Glad everything looks like it's going fine. He's got a 50-minute look at the Porky Pig cartoon, The Blowout, up on the site right now, so looks like everything's okay, so thank God for that. And finally, a bit of news about Tom and Jerry Golden Collection Volume 2, the one that never came out. One of the reasons is the first tune on it would have been Mouse Cleaning from 1948, which should have also been the last tune on Volume 1, but anyway. The tune is one of 2 Hanna-Barbera shorts that were not included on any of the previous Tom and Jerry releases since it has issues. But recently on Warner Brothers' own YouTube channel, they recently added the Tom and Jerry Mega Compilation 7, which begins with almost 4.5 minutes of the restored edition of Mouse Cleaning. Now, it doesn't have the bad scenes, but the fact it's there means they realize there is some call for its release. We will go over it when we get to Tom and Jerry, likely now starting in January. Like John Lennon said, life is what happens when you're making other plans, and there's been a lot of life going on the past few months. So I'm surprised I've gotten this far already. So fingers crossed going forward. Next time it'll be Golden Collection Volume 3 with more Bugs Bunny and beginning to focus in specifically on certain directors. I'm John Harcher. Thanks for watching.